All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. It's episode 36 of the podcast. Today we're going to be doing some hardwood horns. Texas made a really big statement on their way to a Big 12 tournament championship and a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. So let's get right into it. Big 12 tournament, I think everybody's expectations should have been for Texas. Make it to the final of the Big 12 tournament. They obviously made it to the final. I think a win in that Big 12 tournament proves that they're a really good basketball team. I think most people generally see the Big 12 as the best basketball conference in the country right now. And to go into a tournament format and be able to win that, a pretty big deal. Interestingly enough, they didn't look just amazing, except for the Kansas game, the final. They kind of struggled a little bit. They played Oklahoma State the first game, and the score doesn't really reflect to me, how that game actually went. They won it 61-47, which is pretty comfortable. But the second half was pretty brutal to watch. It was kind of opposite day. It was the first time I remember seeing a Texas basketball team come out hot in the first half, and then just sort of, it's almost like they didn't want to be there in the second half. So there was a lot of turnovers, just some sloppy play, not really good offense going on. They still end up winning the game. I think the kind of a big surprise for me in that game, Dylan Dessou. I've been kind of talking about Dylan Dessou all year, from just like his offensive game just seems really labored. It doesn't seem like he's very athletic. He kind of moves slow, and I'm saying all these things in comparison to what's his name? Christian Bishop, the other big they bring in, and Texas really doesn't have a big. They got a bunch of forwards. They're all in like the 6'9", 6'10" range, 6'8", stuff like that. But when you watch Christian Bishop, he seems much more explosive underneath the basket when he gets the ball, and Dylan Dessou has just always kind of looked slow and lumbering and just, really not athletic, and it showed offensively until this tournament. He had a double-double against Oklahoma State. He scored 11 points, had 11 rebounds. Jabari Rice led the Horns in scoring in that game with 15. But it was kind of a pedestrian start to the Big 12 tournament for Texas, and they obviously won comfortably. But I think what was interesting about the game for me was, again, Dessou, seeing him sort of become like this force down low. And I've been talking the last few weeks of the season about how Texas really needs to find some guys that they can get some offense from close to the basket, because what teams are starting to do, and what's dangerous about the way Texas played a lot this year, and it seems like Texas has kind of played this way for a long time. Texas has always kind of had these guys that are perimeter shooters. And the problem with shooting from the perimeter is, if you can't get an inside presence, or you can't take people off the dribble and get to the basket, the problem with that is they just start to push you out defensively and really stay in your face out there. And it's tough to knock down those shots. The other problem with being a perimeter shooting team like that, if you're not hot that night, or the opposite of that, you're cold, it's really tough to generate offense. And we saw that a lot from Texas this year. When the guards struggled, it was tough for them. I mean, we went like long stretches where 10-minute stretches. As a matter of fact, I believe in the second half of that Oklahoma State game, there was a 10-minute stretch where they didn't score a basket. So it was really good to see them get the ball inside and see somebody be able to be consistent down low with the basketball and score the basketball. That took them into a game against TCU that they ended up winning 66-60. It was a close game. They split with TCU in the regular season. This one was another one of those kind of opposite day games for Texas. They started off pretty good, built a pretty decent lead at the half, and then just kind of, I don't know, they just kind of floated through the second half of the game. They ended up winning. The interesting part about this game for me was both Bishop and Dessou led the Longhorns with 15 points apiece. And again, that's just something we haven't seen. And it makes Texas tough. If you got guys that can take the basketball down low, turn around, make layups, it makes it tough on the defense because the defense has to start helping. Those guards, those guys covering the perimeter guys have to start kind of leaking in to try to create turnovers and just help out. And then you can kick it out and you got wide open shots for three. So I'm hoping as we continue, as we start this NCAA tournament tonight and as we continue, hopefully, in the NCAA tournament, we see more of that. Because I think for Texas to really make a deep run, that's what we're going to have to see. And then the finale over Kansas State, won that easily, 20 points. It actually eclipsed the ass whooping they gave Kansas in Austin just 7 days earlier, 76-56. I think if you're a Texas fan, that was probably one of the most complete games you've seen Texas play. They started out on fire, really put a lot of pressure on KU, and then just maintained that pressure throughout the game, which was pretty interesting because that was sort of, to me, it was like a default home game for Kansas. I think where they were playing, I think they said it was like 30 miles from Lawrence, Kansas. If you watched the game at all, you certainly saw there was a very small peppering of burnt orange mixed in with all of this blue. And when Kansas was doing something well, that place was raucous. When they weren't, it was quiet. So from a fan perspective, environment perspective, it was very much a road game for Texas. And they went in and just absolutely dominated a number one seed. And at the time, people thought KU was the overall number one seed in the tournament. Found out they're not now, obviously. Again, Dylan Dessou, 18 points in that game. He really dominated Kansas down low. I hope he continue. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was just you know how sometimes when you're up against something and you just say fuck it and you just go and do, and sometimes it works out for you, sometimes it don't. I don't know. I don't know if Dylan Dessou just kind of had that type of moment in his head and just said, fuck it, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to try to score in this tournament, or what, or if they made a concerted effort to get him the ball and said, dude, we're going to get you the ball. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to try. I don't know what that looked like. Maybe Rodney Terry saw a matchup, type issue, all three of those games. I don't know what he would have saw in those games that he didn't see in the other games. The only caveat to that would be the kid out of TCU that didn't play because of all the, I don't know, whatever the allegations were that his coach was mistreating him. Obviously he was a big, couldn't play in that game. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe he does make a difference in that game. I really don't know. It doesn't matter. He didn't play in that game. So again, Texas kind of rolls through the Big 12 tournament. Looks really impressive. A lot of Texas fans are starting to talk about, man, could we get a number one seed? Like, what has to happen for us to get a number one seed? They go into the tournament. They get I was looking back at like the kind of the record for the NCAA tournament. I didn't realize how bad it's been for Texas. I knew there was a long drought where they didn't win any games. I knew there was a drought where they didn't even get to the tournament. But they got their first win in the NCAA tournament last year since 2014. So that was a huge milestone for Chris Beard and the Texas Longhorns, obviously. This team started out the season ranked very highly. A lot of expectations for this team regarding the tournament. People were talking. I was talking about, could this team be the type of team that makes it to a Final Four? I think they're built to make it to a Final Four. Basketball's, you just never know. I mean, one of these teams that's in this tournament right now is going to win 6 games and they're going to win the national championship. If you look across college basketball this year, it's kind of hard to win 6 games in a row. So they're certainly capable. They're certainly probably one of, 10 teams, 15 teams maybe in this tournament that are capable of winning 6 games and winning this tournament. But they haven't been to the Elite Eight since 2008. where they kind of ripped off a little run of Elite Eights. And I say a little run, I think it was 2 straight Elite Eights or 2 Elite Eights within 3 years, something along those lines. So there's been a lot of expectation, and there's, and Texas basketball fans have sort of been yearning for this type of team and ready for this type of opportunity in the tournament. Texas ends up being the number 2 seed in the Midwest region, which I was a little bit disappointed in. I don't know how they seed basketball game, or I don't know how they seed this tournament. I'm sure it's a body of work, and I'm sure there's certain things that these I guess it's a committee that looks at this stuff. They look at this overall picture and they say these are the 4 best teams. These are the the next 4. And I don't know what it looks like to me. If Kansas was the overall number 1 seed going into the Big 12 tournament championship game, which I didn't hear anybody during any of the commentary during that game or halftime, and I don't sit there and watch like college basketball analysts, but I didn't hear anybody say anything other than they thought Kansas was probably going to end up being the number 1 seed. And I heard some of them actually say, regardless of what happens in this game, Kansas is probably going to be the number 1 overall seed. I don't know how a Texas team that's firmly at this point a 2 seed can beat that team as bad as they beat that team 2 times within 7 days and not get some consideration for number 1. So I was a bit disappointed in that. Maybe that's a pipe dream. I don't really know. Again, I don't really know how they seed this stuff and what they're looking at. And I'm a fan, and I'm going to be biased towards Texas a little bit and say, man, they just beat the shit out of a number 1 seed multiple times in the last 7 days. How is it possible, that this team is, and maybe I don't even know who you would take out if you didn't take Texas, or if you did decide to put Texas in that top 4 teams. I don't know who you would take out. It ultimately doesn't matter because, again, you got to go win 6 games. The first round game tonight at 6:25 Central Time is against Colgate. Colgate, I don't know much about them. They're 26-8, just like Texas's record. I do know that they're the best 3-point shooting team in the country from a percentage perspective. They hit 41% of their 3 balls, which is really good. So my assumption based off of that is that they're a disciplined team. We're going to see lots of passing. I think they've got a guard that's a pretty big guard. I think I saw where he's like 6'5", 215, can really handle the ball well, likes to take people to the basket and then kick the ball out. So I think we'll see a lot of drive and kick, and I think on those kicks we'll see a lot of swing passes to really mess up Texas because, and I think Colgate knows this. Texas is a super aggressive defensive team, and you see it a lot where they get caught trying to help on the backside, and then a kick out pass and then a swing pass gets a guy wide open on the perimeter a lot against Texas. So I think Texas has got to be careful. They don't want to me, they don't want to not be aggressive because that's their game. Like, they're aggressive defensively, and they like to be really aggressive off turnovers, get the ball down the court and score. They like to run. Fast-paced game certainly fits the Texas mindset. Whereas for Colgate, they want to slow this thing down, take a lot of time, pass it around, find open guys and give them good looks and knock down some shots. So Texas has to be careful not to be so aggressive that they give a lot of those wide open shots, but they also don't want to just let this guy get to the basket and take easy points in the paint either. So I don't know what the line is on this game. I fully expect Texas to win this game, and I'm not saying that from a perspective of Texas is going to go win this game. I'm just saying I expect the number 2 seed to beat the number 15 seed. I think if you look at look at both teams, Texas is clearly the most talented team. They should go win the basketball game, but we see it every year. There's always upsets on day one. It's one of the coolest parts about March Madness is just it's different from football because in football you typically don't see like a number 1 team get beat by Well, part of it is we just don't play that type of playoff format. But even back in the day, when it was just the BCS and even into the 14 playoff, typically like the number one and number two teams are really, really good. And you don't see those lower seeded teams beat them much. In a lot of cases, the number one team and the number two team just run away from the lower seeded teams. But in basketball, whole different thing. Anything goes. Those teams that get in and get into those first round games, they're excited to be there. Uh, they got a chip on their shoulder because they know they had to play through a tournament and win a tournament to get in the first place. They were never, Colgate was never in the conversation probably about being in the tournament until they won their conference championship or won their tournament, whatever, however it works in whatever conference they're in. So, and maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm just assuming. I don't know. I know I haven't heard a single peep about Colgate all season until this bracket came out. So, if you're the Texas Longhorns and if you're any highly ranked team, you got to come into this first round game and really be focused and really be ready to play because you're about to get the best shot probably. It may not be the most talented shot you get, but you're probably going to get the best shot from a team that you get in the entire tournament in this first round. So we'll see how that turns out tonight. Possible second round opponents. And this one, when I looked at this bracket, I was like, wow. The second round opponents for Texas, if they advance, are either going to be 7 seed A&M or 10 seed Penn State. And both of those teams played in their conference tournament final. And Penn State, I didn't get to see all of it. I watched maybe the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game. But Penn State came back from a 17-point deficit against Purdue, who I believe is the number 1 seed, and almost won it. A&M got the crap kicked out of them by Bama. However, just a few games ago, A&M really, put one on Alabama down in College Station. So they're certainly a capable team. I was really surprised to see both of these teams sort of seated where they were. And from a draw perspective, to me, it's a tough second round draw. Now I haven't looked at all the bracket. I don't do that. I don't fill out brackets. So maybe there's some other looks out there that, maybe there's some other second round matchups that are tougher for a 2 seed. I don't know. But it seemed like a pretty tough matchup for second round opponents. Now, after that, I think it's very favorable for Texas if they can get past tonight and if they can play well in the second round game and get past the second round game. I think it's not out of the, realm of possibility that they wind up in the Elite Eight with a chance to move on to the Final Four. And if you look at this team, that's what people wanted this team to do. I've been talking about it all season. Is this the type of team that can go play in a Final Four or go play in a Elite Eight? I think it is. Obviously, they just have to go do it. I think the keys to a deep run, we talked about one of them already. We got to get Dessou and Bishop going. They have to stay involved offensively. It makes it so much easier on the guards to have that presence underneath the basket that, hey, I can get this guy the ball and he can create some offense. I don't have to create for him, and I don't have to be the only guy shooting or the only group of guys shooting. When Texas's backcourt gets hot, man, they are tough shooting. They're a really good shooting group when they're hot, and there's 4 of them that can make baskets when they're hot. And I'll just say this. I think if that backcourt gets as hot as it was early on in the season, and it was really 3 guys early in the season, Tyrese Hunter, Marcus Carr, obviously, and then Jabari Rice. If Arterio Morris can stay hot like he was in the tournament, they're going to be a tough out for anybody. They're going to be a really tough team. And if they can combine that type of shooting with that presence underneath the basket, tough team. Again, who knows what they actually go do. We've seen this team be really good at times. We've seen this team, come out and kind of lay an egg. The trip to Lubbock against Texas Tech was a perfect example of this team, like almost just not realizing they were playing a game. It's almost like they just I don't know, they were in bizarro world, and then they get off a bus and they're in the arena and and someone says, "Hey man, y'all got to play a basketball game." That's kind of what it looked like. It was really rough first half. And we've seen that several times for Texas down the stretch. But this didn't play good enough in one half of the game to be able to win the game. I think another key is we need more guard penetration, something we saw a little bit of in the Big 12 tournament championship game was guards taking people off the dribble and getting to the basket, scoring some easy points in the paint. If they can continue to do that, again, that makes them tough. That makes them like three-dimensional. And to me, for so long this season, it felt like Texas was really one-dimensional. It was all about the guard play. It was all about knocking down shots. They didn't take the ball to the basket a lot, and then obviously, there just wasn't a whole lot of, hey, let's get the ball under the basket to the big guys. Number three, I think they got to protect the ball. I think this stands for anybody. It's kind of a basketball. You have to win basketball games, especially tough ones. Is you got to protect the ball, and then defensive intensity. You look at the point totals in this Big 12 tournament: 60, 56, and 47 points allowed. If they can maintain that type of defensive intensity throughout however many games they play in the tournament, that gives them a really good shot to be able to score enough, do enough offensively to win games. And even if you're holding people to 50, 40 points, even low 60s, if you're doing that consistently, you really give the offense some wiggle room. They don't have to score a lot of points to win games. So there's the four keys for me on a deep run. We'll see what happens. Again, tip off tonight at 6:25 Central Time against Colgate. Let's talk a little bit about Rodney Terry. We've been talking, I don't know when we started talking about Rodney Terry specifically as it pertains to the Texas job, but there's a big contingent of Texas fans that after that Big 12 tournament are 100%. Let's get Rodney, man. That's our guy. The team loves him, and hey, those guys do absolutely love him. You could see that after they won the Big 12 championship game. A lot of guys kind of getting behind the camera and motioning, this is the guy, hire him, stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. It's always great for a coach to sort of have that backing from his players. Problem is, all those guys aren't going to be on the team next year. And again, we've talked about that concern, and it's one concern for me is, does he have the ability to sort of rebuild what is built and what he's coaching today? Does he have the ability to do that? And I don't know the answer, and I've never claimed to know the answer. There's a lot of guys that think Rodney Terry is kind of like the mastermind behind, the Texas defense and kind of the mastermind behind the recruiting at Texas. I really don't know the answer. Ultimately, I just want the best guy to get hired. And I don't want anybody at the University of Texas to sort of jump to any sort of conclusion. It's real easy after the emotion of doing what they did in the Big 12 tournament and saying, let's pull the trigger, man. This is our guy. I've always kind of thought that Rodney Terry needed to win the Big 12 regular season because I thought Texas would do okay in the Big 12 tournament, but a lot of times, the best teams don't win the tournament in their conference. So I wasn't so much concerned about the Big 12 tournament. And then I thought he needed to make an Elite Eight type run for him to be like a shoe-in. And so that's kind of always been the mark I had. And I don't count, obviously, but it's always kind of been the sort of the standard I would apply to the situation if I were sitting in the seat that gets to hire the next Texas basketball coach. He fell a little short on the Big 12 regular season title. He went out and they did a really great job in the Big 12 tournament. He won that. So now where does that leave us? To me, I think it still leaves us with a deep run, but something that was interesting this morning is Chip Brown from Horns 247 reported that he had a source tell him that he thought a Sweet 16 run for Rodney Terry and the Texas Longhorns this year would put him in a position to be the lead candidate for that job. And I don't know if CDC has listen, all these athletic directors, regardless of how well their certain sports are doing, they always have a list. They always have a list of probably 3 to 5 guys that they would, start with if something came up and they needed to hire a coach. So I think these ADs, they've always got I mean, even the Alabama AD, he has a list for football coaches because one day Nick Saban's going to walk in his office and say, I'm retiring after this season, or you've got me for 2 more years, or something similar to that. And he's going to have to start his search for the next head coach at the University of Alabama. So they've all got a list. Terry's obviously on that list. I don't know who else is on that list for CDC. And they're not obviously, they're not going to be talking to these other coaches during the season. Most of the coaches that are on his list, I would assume, are playing still. So there's kind of like this dead period from a head coaching perspective. And for some Texas fans, that's a kind of a heartbreak. They're like, man, let's just hire this guy. And I see some advantages to that. You shore up recruiting. They've got a good crop of guys coming in that are already committed and I think signed actually. Surely they could get out of those letters of intent with the whole Beard situation. Because I think they signed like it was just a couple of weeks before the Chris Beard stuff went down. So I would think the NCAA would let them out of that if they wanted to. So there is advantages of pulling the trigger and saying, Rodney Terry, you're the dude. Those guys more than likely stay. And the fact that they haven't decommitted or gone through that process yet leads me to believe that Rodney Terry probably was a big part of their recruitment, or they're very comfortable with Rodney Terry, and he's a coach that they would like to play for. So there's that. There's keeping guys that do still have eligibility. There's just like this stability factor to having a coach and having a named coach. So I get that from those guys' perspective. Then the other side of me says, hey man, Rodney Terry, we kind of got like this ace in the hole. He's doing a good job. And I don't know if I probably wasn't the first person to talk about it, but I started talking about like Texas, you got to pay this guy. Like, I don't know what an interim coach makes at Texas, but let's pay him because he's doing a hell of a job right now. So let's get him some more money now and we can figure out this long-term stuff later. And they did that. And it was crazy. It was like a week later. It came out that Rodney Terry was going to get a really nice raise from the University of Texas. So Texas kind of has that guy, in the hole. And nobody's probably talking to him either. He's in the tournament. And even if there are other athletic directors that have his name on the list, that's not going to happen at this point in the season. I don't feel like. So it makes sense to me to just kind of go, hey man, I've got Rodney Terry. I know I can offer him the job, and make sure you just do your due diligence with any other candidates that happen to be on your list. And none of that can really happen until the season's over for everybody. So I think one or two things are obviously going to happen. But I think if he makes it to, and I still think it's Elite Eight. I mean, I think Elite Eight makes Chris Del Conte go, how the hell do you not keep a guy? And listen, he coached the majority of the season. He may or may not have been instrumental in building that team. And when I say he obviously was instrumental in it, he may or may not be the cause of all of those guys being there. And who knows what that looks like, whether it's 70% or 20%, and whatever the deal was. He may not be that guy, but he is the guy that took those guys for the majority of the season and had a really successful season. So to me, if he gets to Elite Eight, there's no way in hell Chris Del Conte doesn't hire him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll look back and regret making that bold statement. But to me, if Rodney Terry and the Texas Longhorns make it to the Elite Eight, he's the guy. So we'll see what happens. Again, Chip Brown has a source that says Sweet 16. That's 2 games. So they make it through this weekend, and maybe Rodney Terry's the head coach at the University of Texas. For the record, I don't care who's the head coach at the University of Texas. I just want to make sure that, and I'm not making sure, but I want to make sure that those guys, I hope those guys will make sure that they don't make snap decisions. They, vet all the candidates. They make sure they do their due diligence, and then they hire the right guy. And hopefully Texas basketball can just move on. I have a feeling it's going to be Rodney Terry, which again, I'm totally happy with. The guys love him, and I think, the only negative, again, I have the concern, and I don't think it's a negative. It's just a concern. Can this dude build teams like that? And then I think what we saw after Chris Beard was removed from the program was the defense kind of fell back a little bit, but the offense did get better. Now, is that a psychological thing? And offense is easier than defense? I have no idea. Is it something Rodney Terry specifically, kind of employed for that to happen? I have no idea. I'm not a basketball analyst, but anyway, that's the basketball. So we'll see what happens tonight. Really excited about seeing Texas go after their second tournament win in as many years. Join me tomorrow for the bullpen. We're going to talk Texas baseball leading up to Big 12 play. There's only I think there's this weekend series, and then next weekend Texas Tech comes to town to open up Big 12 play. Subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that little bell for notifications. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at Horn Takes. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, criticisms, and concerns. I love them all. Book them.